Okay. So in EBS, if you get access to fresh instance to start with the implementation, we need access to one responsibility. Which responsibility access we required? The fresh EBS instance, which responsibility access is required so that we can start with the configuration and we can complete the entire implementation.
Admin. Application developer for AOL.
Oh, somebody is speaking. There is some noise from there. Yeah, please. Anyone?
Sysadmin.
Yeah, sysadmin. That's it. There is no other point here. Just sysadmin. So we need access to sysadmin. The actual name is right. Just full form is system administrator responsibility, right? So system administrator responsibility. With the help of this system administrator responsibility, what we could do is very initially for which modules we are going to implement, what is the scope of the implementation in terms of application. For all those we can create the responsibilities and we can create the user, we can assign the responsibilities to the user, and we can start defining the business group, and we can set the profile options, right? Through the responsibilities we can create the primary ledger, legal entity, and application specific setups. This is how we can start working on it. From system administrator responsibility only you can create the custom menus as per the user requirements and all. These and all we can do. So if we assign this system administrator responsibility to any user, that user can act as a implementation consultant. That means if somebody is working as a consultant, they need access to system administrator responsibility. They can start with anything and they can complete the entire implementation based on the business requirement. But system point, we are talking about only system point of view, not business point of view. So full access the system administrator can have to do any sort of configuration within the application environment. In case of fusion, in EBS, user required access to system administrator responsibility. But in case of fusion, the consultant need access to which roles? Okay, in fusion, the consultant need access to which roles? Very primarily, the consultant need access to 3 roles in fusion application to do any sort of configuration in the fusion environment or say cloud environment. It could be anything. So those roles are application implementation consultant, application implementation consultant. So why we have to assign this role to this user? If we assign this role to this user, what user can do is the user can perform any application related setups, any application. So application related setups can be performed by user, which user has access to role called as application implementation consultant. Okay, so you created one user, you assign the role called as application implementation consultant. That user can perform any application setups. But if the user is able to create any application related setup, that is not enough. That user should have access to other users creation if required. Yes, definitely as a part of implementation we have to create many users, and we have to assign the roles to those users to perform certain transactions based on the application and their job in the organization. So that sort of access also required. In case of system administrator responsibility in EBS, yes, user can create responsibilities, user can create the users, user can assign the roles to that, user can create responsibilities to the user, setting up profile option, etc. All can be done. But With just application implementation consultant, the user can primarily do the any application setups, AP implementation, AR implementation. But creating the users, assigning the roles to the users as per the business requirement cannot be performed being a application implementation consultant role. Okay, if you assign this role to any user, that user cannot do all those activities. To allow that user to create new users and to assign the roles to that users, or to customize the roles as per business requirement, we have to assign another job called as IT manager, IT security manager. You can call it as IT security manager. Okay, you have to assign the role called as IT security manager. What access user can get because of IT security manager? If any user has access to IT security manager role, that user can create another users. That user can assign roles to user, assign roles to user, and that user can create custom roles. The user can create custom roles. Okay, not only these are very primary, the other information also will come across when you are working, but primarily these are the points you have to understand. If any user has access to IT security manager role, that user can create users, and the user can assign the roles to the same user or other users, and roles can be customized. Okay, can be customized who has access to IT security manager. So other role is employee role. So employee role is required to run the reports. It will allow us to access the page from where we can run the reports, and it will give the access to the employees for self-service employee access. Employee self-service access. Employee self-service access, or say employee self-service pages access that user can have. Okay, so primary roles for consultant. Okay, primary roles to consultant. Primary roles to consultant. So this is what we have to understand. So here, as a part of application, so if you give the access to any user to application implementation consultant role, that user can do the application setups, but there should be some environment where the user will have access because of this application implementation consultant. The environment is FSM, functional setup manager. Okay, functional setup manager. Functional setup manager. So if you assign this role to any user, that user will have access to FSM, functional setup manager. With the help of functional setup manager, that user can do the application setups. And if you assign IT security manager role to any user, that user will have access to security console. With the help of security console, the user can create users and role assignments, and role can be customized from the security console only. If you assign the employee role to the user, that user will have access to, will have a direct access. Okay, direct access to submitting the reports and employee related self-service access functions the user can have. Instead of saying functions, we call it as privileges. Okay, that this role will give certain privileges to the user to run the reports and related to employee self-service access related privileges. So these are the three primary roles which need to be assigned to someone who is going to work as a consultant for Fusion implementation. Any questions here to understand only this point, please? Okay, the roles will give access to which area. Through that roles, what the users can do, we are trying to understand. Okay, there are a few other points also we have to discuss related to these roles. Yes, once we start working on that relevant area, we'll focus on that. But now in this stage, those points not required. This is what we require to understand. So any questions on this, please?
Question, Lakshman.
Yeah.
So now, if we walk into any this Fusion implementation project, right? So traditionally, you would have some sysadmin will be sitting and they would give us these permissions, right? Like sysadmin administrator responsible or any other kind of grants. Now, with the Fusion projects, so what kind of people will be sitting in-house to give us these permissions? Because we enter as an outside consultants, right? So there would be a sysadmin team because these are done by the based on subscription they have, right, to the cloud access they have. Yeah. Is it a similar explanation that we would be going with?
Yeah, same approach how we have in EBS. Again, see the points which you mentioned, that depends on size of the project. Simple. See, ideally, when our client take the subscription from Oracle, they'll provide one username and password. Okay, they'll create one username and password. They'll be providing those credentials. So with the help of those credentials, you can start working on the application. The reason is, by default, more or less these roles they will assign and they'll give that user to us, so that you can start with that user to do any sort of configuration, or else with the help of that user we can create our own user and we can associate these roles. That is the first point. When you talk about sysadmin team and all, that totally depends on size of the project. Okay, it's a very huge implementation, global implementation, etc. In that case, there could be some sysadmin team who will be just managing all these permissions, user creations, etc. And if you are working for small and mid-sized clients, ideally you will have all the privileges being a consultant for that project. What sort of privileges? It's very simple. If you have access to the user who has these roles assignment, that is a full permissions where any consultant can have, and we can create additional users and we can play with that instance as per implementation requirement. So that's how it works. Any other questions here, please?
Lakshman?
Yeah.
Can you please put some light on the environment? Can you repeat, like when you said that application consultant is related to, you need to assign it to environment FSM and IT security managers to security console. Can you just repeat what is the context of the environment here?
So here the same point. The consultant has to perform the application configuration. Okay. So with the help of FSM, functional setup manager only, we can perform the setups. If you take example of EBS, if you want to do AP setups, you have to be in the AP responsibility. If you want to do AR setups, you can do it from the AR responsibility. But here, since there is no responsibility concept, Oracle is giving the area called as functional setup manager, which is centralized environment to perform any application configuration. If you want to perform any application configuration from FSM, we need FSM access. To get FSM access, we should have a role called as application implementation consultant. This role will give the access to FSM so that we can perform the application related setups. And if you are going to perform just setups, that is not enough. You have to create the users and you have to create the custom roles. You have to associate those seeded or custom roles to the respective users as per their business need. For that, we need access to security console to do all these activities. Not only this, there are many other we'll discuss. We need access to security console. How any user can have access to security console? With the help of IT security manager. If user has access to IT security manager, they can access the environment called as security console. Then they'll be able to perform these. In the same way, if you assign the employee role to the user, the user will be able to run the reports and they can have access to the employee self-service information, self-service related access, so that they can have, they'll be able to have access to relevant data. This is the point we are trying to understand here. Any other questions on the same point, please?
Yeah, Lakshman, this is Hari.
Please.
Yeah, Lakshman, for a sysadmin, I think most of the times there is no need to run any kind of a reports, right? And moreover, as per my understanding, yesterday you were telling like reports can be run with the.
I'm not saying for sysadmin they'll run the reports. See, when we are doing the implementation, there are certain jobs which you have to submit in Fusion for synchronization, or else you take example. So we'll run certain jobs. Even in EBS also we'll run that replicate seed data program. Okay, first of all you have to navigate to SRS window, then only you can select that request and you can submit. Similar jobs we have here, but not exactly replicate seed data program. When you are doing the configurations as a consultant, you have to do the testing also. So in all these activities, across all these activities, there is a need of submitting some programs, the setups to synchronize and to verify certain data and to run the report and to check. So for that purpose, okay, and along with that, not only just for that, to have access to this employee related data and all, we have to do that. So at least, or else, you see here, employee purpose is that is a purpose of employee job. But if you want to run only these reports, the report related privileges you have as a part of application implementation consultant role also. But just to address the purpose why we use employee role for every user, this is what we'll give. When you are working as a consultant, definitely we need access to everything, not only doing the setups. Once you do the setups, we'll be testing the transaction flows and we'll be running the reports, we'll be running certain processes. That is the reason we have to assign the role called as employee to the user. I mean to user in the sense consultant user. Yeah, please go ahead if you have any questions. Fine.
Yeah, Lakshman.
Please, you can directly go with your question, please.
Sorry. Yeah. So we just saw like RBAC has been introduced in our Fusion application, but we are seeing responsibility was there in the Oracle ABS.
One second. RBAC is not introduced only in the Fusion. In fact, we have RBAC concept in EBS also. That is limited
responsibility.
Web applications, I applications.
Okay.
I applications, we have a concept of roles and privileges where we provision. Accordingly, that application user can have access additional privileges or certain restrictions. Okay, since
okay, so do we have?
Yeah, please.
My question was, do we have new tables introduced in our Oracle Fusion?
New tables for what?
To capture the roles, to store the roles what we have created.
Yes. We have a separate tables for that. Because in EBS, just we have a roles, but this sort of classifications and all we don't have. Those are direct privileges which are included within the role. There is no classifications like job, duty, abstract, data roles. That's how we don't have. Okay. But yes, we have in new tables only for this. Fine. Okay. So this is a point we have to understand. Now I'll take you a simple example. Say there is user called as X and user Y. So in Fusion, if you want to create user, you required business unit, EBS operating unit we are calling as business unit, and we need legal entity information. In EBS, if you want to create the user, we don't need all these details, right? Just in EBS will provide the username and will provide the password. System will ask us to re-enter the password. That's it. That's how you can create the user in EBS. But in the Fusion, if you want to create the user, at the time of user creation, you have to select the default business unit, any one of the business unit. It is not mandatory, okay, but okay, that point we'll discuss at the time of creation. But you have to select one business unit. Maybe the user is working for which BU, that BU, and the associated legal entity. You have to select this. But we know very well, in fresh instance, if you want to create any user, it is not possible. Why? How come you can expect our business units and legal entities in the fresh environment? So if you want to create the business unit and all, definitely primary ledger should be ready. We have to associate primary ledger with the business units. That's how primary ledger also should be ready. That means we need primary ledger, business unit, legal entity, everything should be ready. Then only we can create the user. But if anybody is going to do the fresh implementation, say as a consultant, we are going to do the implementation. So if you want to create the user, we need business unit and legal entity, which is not possible to have at the time of kickstarting the implementation. So that is the reason what Oracle did is, Oracle given one more option to create the user without business unit and legal entity. Okay. So without business unit and legal entity, if you are going to create the user, that user will be creating from security console. Okay. From security console, you can create the user without BU and LE. Without BU and LE, you can create the user from security console. Who can have access to security console? The user who has access to IT security manager, that user can have access to security console. That user can create the user, other user, without any BU or LE. And if you want to create the user with business unit and legal entity association, that you can do from HCM. HCM, we have a shared function called as employee user. Okay, from HCM you can create the user. Fine. From HCM you can create the user. Or else let me write in this way. If you want to create any user from HCM, human capital management, okay, which is connected with this employee definitions and all. So business unit and legal entities are mandatory, but if you want to create the user from security console without business unit and legal entity, you can create. So in any fresh implementation, it is not possible to create user from HCM, since we don't find any BUs and LEs before we create. Always it is possible to create the user from security console, since there is no need of BU and LE in the fresh environment. So if you are going to create user from the security console, why you are creating? To start with the implementation only. To start with the implementation only, you will be creating the new user. For that reason, the user which you create from the security console without BU and LE, that user we call as implementation user. Okay, we call as implementation user. To start with the implementation, okay, we need one user. That user you cannot create from HCM, you can create only from security console. What are the user you create from security console? That user you call as implementation user. When that user will become implementation user, not just because you are creating a user from security console. You have to create the user from security console. The purpose is for implementation. If you want to do implementation, you have to assign these three roles to that user. Then that user will have a profile of implementation user profile. Okay, by just I'll go and create one user called as Mr. X within the security console. I don't assign any roles. Even if I call that user is implementation user, there is no meaning in that, because that user cannot perform anything since we are not assigning any roles. Okay. And here, whatever the user you create from HCM, okay, that user we call as employee user. That means when you are creating the user from HCM, we'll create employee definition. To that employee we will give you the username. That is the reason that we call as employee user. Employee user definition is required business unit and legal entity. Okay, business unit and legal entity. So what is the difference between these two users? Okay, this is the users classification, the Fusion application, implementation user and employee user. So if you create implementation user, from that user you can do all the application related setups. When you can do, if you have access to this role, all application related setups you can perform being a implementation user, which is created from security console. And the implementation user who has access to IT security manager, that user can create this, all these activities this user can perform. And if the same implementation user has access to employee role, they can run the report. Since this implementation user is not a employee user, so this self-service access, even the user will get, there won't be any data, because this user is not created from HCM. This user is implementation user is created from security console. Even this employee role you assign to this user, this data won't be available, since that is the definition, the user definition is not an employee definition. Okay, but this user will have access to this report submission page. So that is the first point. Say for example you assign these 3 roles. Okay, so you assigned these 3 roles to these 2 users. You created these 2 users, you assign these 3 roles to these 2 users. Okay, Mr. X is implementation user, Mr. Y user is employee user. You assign these 2 roles, and with respect to only these roles, these 2 users will have same privileges. But when it comes to transaction, or else let's talk about setup. So there is one point to understand. So now this user, Y is user, X is user, but Y is employee user. Based on the employee record the user is created, at the time of user creation, this BU and LE we should select. Y is user, but the Y is created from security console. X is created from security console, but X is not a employee user, just created in the security console. But the point is, these 2 users has access to same roles. Now what this user can do, what user this cannot do, and how it works, we'll see. So being a employee user, this user, when you talk about finance, I'm talking about finance. If you take procurement and all, there are other points, those are not required for us now. When we are working on P2P cycle, those will get connected. So if you are going to do, say you created 2 users, one is implementation user from security console, other user is employee user from HCM. When you are using these users, what are the restrictions we have? What is the difference? Being an employee user, since this employee user has access to those above 3 roles, the user can do everything, including supplier site creation. So being an employee user, that user can create the supplier sites, those can be assigned to business units. Just simply I can say supplier sites. And being an implementation user, this user can create, or else let me write detail level, supplier sites and these sites we have to assign to BUs, right? Site assignments. Site assignments. All these can be performed by employee user. But when it comes to implementation user can create just supplier, which is a master record, header information. These sites and site assignments cannot be done by implementation user. So that is the big difference between implementation user and employee user with respect to finance. And why this restriction we have? So if at all any user wants to create supplier definition, complete supplier definition, okay, the user should be a procurement agent, only procurement agent, nothing but buyer. Procurement agent can create suppliers. When you say suppliers, full definition: supplier, header, site, and assignments. Okay, the procurement agent can create suppliers. Who can act as a procurement agent? In case of EBS, employee you can convert as a buyer. In the same way, you can convert, we can convert employee user as procurement agent. So employee user you can convert as a procurement agent. That procurement agent can create the supplier sites. Here, when you talk about implementation user, the implementation user which you are creating from security console, so by default that user cannot create the supplier sites, but you can convert this user as a employee, so that employee user can be converted as a procurement agent. Then this implementation user also will be able to create the supplier sites and the site assignments. Okay, till release 13 also, in the very latest patch applications, there was no option to convert implementation user as an employee user. But with the recent patch applications, they give an option to convert implementation user as a employee user. That option is available now in the current latest version, release 13. Yes, this is possible. You can convert implementation user as a employee user. If you have an employee user you can convert as a procurement agent. The user who has a profile called as procurement agent, that agent can create the complete supplier definition. Say for example, you have a just implementation user, you complete all the setups, but you cannot create the suppliers. When you cannot create the suppliers, you cannot run the P2Q cycle, you cannot create the purchase orders, you cannot create the invoices and the payables. So that is only the difference. Rest everything remains same if you assign the same roles to that user. And remember, these roles only for the purpose of configurations and user and roles management. But if you want to allow any user, the user can be implementation user which is created from security console, or the user can be employee user which is created from HCM. If you want to allow these users to work on the applications, if you want to allow these two users to work on the payables application, the additional roles need to be assigned to these users related to payables. If you want to allow these two users to work on receivables, yes, you have to assign the additional receivables roles to these users. Okay, by having access to just these roles, these users cannot record any transaction. This is only for the purpose of configuration and administration purpose. This is the point we have to understand. Any questions on this point, please? Direct question. Anyone?
Lakshman,
when we start implementation, like, which user is responsible for creating BUs and LEs? Or which user has the required access to create the BUs and LEs?
So when we have access to instance, we'll get one user from Oracle. Okay, you may continue with that. You may use that user to start with your configuration. Which user you can get from Oracle? Implementation user. Okay, that means the user which is created from the security console, that user you can get from Oracle. You can use that same user, or else you can create another user. That user you can create from where? Security console only. So what ideally we do is, one, till the business units and legal entities are ready, till the time we generally continue with the user which we create from the security console. Once BU and LEs are ready, we'll convert our implementation user which is created from security console, that user as an employee user. From that time we'll continue with the employee user only. That means first we have to create in any environment, fresh environment, user from the security console only for the purpose of implementation. Then we'll start doing all the setups. Once we are ready with the business unit and legal entity, the same implementation user will convert as employee user by using the HCM function. Then we'll be able to do everything including the supplier definition. This is how it works.
So who would create those business unit legal entity, Lakshman? So is it not the implementation consultant responsibility being
Creates these
now?
business units and legal entities in EBS? The same person. Who creates this in EBS?
No, I'm not with a strong EBS background.
Then
That's
you'll
why.
be having many questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Fine. So that's what I recommend. You are not totally from the EBS knowledge and all. It would be difficult for you first. Yeah.
Lakshman, just to facilitate the understanding.
Venkat, I'm sorry, I cannot take any questions from you because there is a lot of noise when you speak, when you unmute. Okay, please. Any other questions from anyone, please?
Lakshman, may I ask one question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, intrinsically, what is the bifurcation of implementation user and employee user mean? Like, are the internal tables for them different or they are same?
No. The point is very simple. The possibility. Okay, when you have access to the user, when you have access to the instance, you cannot create the employee user. That is the reason for temporary purpose you are creating the implementation user. That's it. Okay, that is only the logic why they given this. So when you say employee user, that should have an association with the BU and LE. That's what they made as mandatory. This is not possible, okay, in the very initial stage of implementation. So to create users within the application and to start with the process, they are giving as some intermediate step where you can create the user by using the security console. That user you can convert as implementation user later, or else you can create users directly from the HCM as employee users where BU and LE association is required. Okay, tables and all, tables, the data, everything will be stored in the same users table, but only the point is here with BU and LE, in case of employee user, there will be person ID, person number, but in case of implementation user, there won't be any person association, BU association, LE association. But there is an option to convert implementation user as a employee user. That means the user which is created from security console, that can be converted into HCM function created user, that is nothing but employee user. Only simple point is, in Fusion, by default, the users which you want to use effectively for the transaction process need to be associated with the BU and LE. Take other example. If you want to record purchase orders, if you want to create the requisitions, you cannot do everything from the user which you create from security console. You can do only from employee user. Again, you have to set additional privileges also. Those we'll see in the session. Okay. Since you cannot create employee users directly in fresh instance, they give an option to create user from security console, which doesn't require any BULE selection. That's it. Any questions, please?
So with just implementation user, pretty much I can perform my consultant role as a functional consultant.
Yes. You can perform the transactions also. You can create the transactions also if you assign the relevant roles to that implementation user. Okay, but not related to supplier. Supplier you cannot create, so that supplier related transactions you cannot record. That is only the difference.
Lakshman,
Yeah.
when you say
Lakshman, is it only suppliers or
Venkat, please go ahead.
Lakshman, is it only supplier creation or just like any other employees can do like submitting a
Same, I'm just I was talking about it. So your voice is not clear. There is some issue with your whatever the instrument you are using as a speaker, etc. There is some issue. Yeah, please. Any questions from others?
when you say
When
transaction, can they create invoices and receipts also? Because for those transactions, employee ID or person ID is mandatory, right? I don't know how it is in Fusion.
Which transactions?
Like receipts or invoices.
Yeah, but it is possible to create. You can create the invoices. Okay, you can create the invoices. You can process the payments, and you can create any transaction. Any transaction. From the implementation user except supplier related transactions. I mean, you cannot create supplier first of all from implementation user, and you won't be in the position to do that relevant transaction.
Because generally for any transaction, there will be user information tagged, right? Like who has created and what is the updated time. So that timestamp and user stamp it will be with the respective user implementation user only, right?
Reality true. Even in EBS also, without employer association, you can create transactions in all the modules. Maybe in purchasing application, that employer association is required to just cross-check approvals and all. Otherwise, in payables, you can create the transactions and you can do any transaction without user engagement, without employee engagement with the user. In receivables, you can do. In fixed assets, you can do. In many other applications, you can do it. That's not mandatory. Depending on the activity which you do, employee association required, yes, system will, without employee association with the user, it won't allow. Say approvals and certain concepts we have where that is mandatory. But ideally, for almost most of the transaction without employee association with the user, yes, we'll be able to do it. Here also same applicable.
Okay,
so
thank you.
could there be a possibility for the implementation user to be identified as an employee user until he completes his responsibility as a consultant, like until he finishes his setups and then maybe sites as well as part of it, or maybe later they can terminate that employee user access?
Yes. No? The point is, you can convert as implementation user, as an employee user once you are ready with the BU and LE, or else you can ignore that implementation user and you can start new employee user from HCM. These two are possible. Why we are creating implementation user? Since there is no option to create employee user directly, we are creating implementation user. You can do all those things. After that, you can delete implementation user. That is possible. They're given that simple option, delete or inactivate. That's how you can manage the users. You may delete implementation user. That is also possible, but ideally we don't do it. Okay.
Lakshman, if we do not have access to the HCM module, so can we still convert implementation user into the employee user?
Yeah, this is shared task, shared function. Like in EBS,
okay.
If you are not going to implement HRMS application, still you will be able to define the basic employee definition, right? That same applicable here. Still you can convert, still you can create employee user.
Hey, Lakshman, this is Shrikant.
Yeah.
See, as you are saying that when the first time implementation if you are going to do, so we have to create the implementation user.
Yeah.
Because there is right. That is what I'm understanding. Now, every time is there any new user is going to add it.
One point here, yes. Whatever you said, correct. That's what we are discussing. Instead of saying we have to create user implementation user, better we can say we have to create the user from security console. Why we are creating? For the purpose of implementation. That is the reason we are calling as implementation user. That is only we have.
Yeah, correct. See, this is going to be repetitive for all the new users, or it is a one-time setup or something like that.
Now, see, the point is very simple. Why we are creating implementation user? Tell me.
Okay, to have the business, because we don't have the business unit and legal entity.
Correct.
Once the business unit and legal entity will be there, then no need of creating or repeating user.
That's it.
That is what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Ramesh here.
Yeah,
I have one question.
please.
By using the implementation user, okay, can we do the data conversion? I mean, supplier master conversion, because in supplier master conversion,
Yeah, got it.
convert the supplier.
That is exception. The exception Oracle given. So here, when you talk about from implementation user, you will be able to do the supplier conversion. If you want to assign the site to any business unit, the user should be a procurement agent for that business unit. When you are doing the through manual process, it's a mandatory. If you are not, say for example, you have a BU1 and BU2, and the user Y is created as a employee user created as a procurement agent. Okay, procurement agent. I'm just writing as agent for BU1. Now this user can create the supplier site. That site can be assigned to only BU1. The site which is created by user Y cannot assign the site to BU2. The reason is Y is acting as a procurement agent only for BU1, not for BU2. But in terms of conversion, even the Y is not acting as a procurement agent for BU2. You can load the data. Not only this Y, even this X also will be able to do it. They made as that is exception in terms of loading process. The user may not be a employee user and may not be a procurement agent. The user may be employee user, may not be a procurement agent for any BU. Still, the loading process would support. But in the loading process, if anything goes wrong, if any records will get struck, if you want to manage that through manual process, it's a mandatory. The user should be a procurement agent for that BU. Then only the sites can be assigned to that relevant BU. That's it. Loading exceptional. This point is exceptional for loading. Fine. Any questions?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. The conversion doesn't look for this condition. Okay, it works. Okay, so that is only the difference we have to understand. Okay, that is only the difference we have to understand when I talk about these two type of users. Ideally, we have implementation user, employee user. Why we are creating implementation user? Hope it's clear to everyone. We cannot create employee user directly. Employee user required BU and LE association for user definition. That is the reason we don't create implementation user, and they cannot create implementation employee user in the first instance. That is the reason first we'll start with implementation user, so that we can start with all the setups, required setups. Once we reach the BU and LE definitions ready, then the implementation user you can convert as employee user, or else you can ignore the implementation user and you can create the new employee user. From there you can do all the setups from this user only. For any user, these privileges are required. These privileges will give access to these. That's already we discussed. Okay, so these are the points we have to understand. Still any questions on this, please?
Lakshman, did I miss the business unit legal entity setup conversation in the previous classes?
We didn't cover anything. We didn't touch instance so far. So only the point is,
gotcha.
EBS operating unit in Fusion we are calling as business unit. That is only the point we have to understand. In EBS we have a legal entity, same here, legal entity, where we can define that company registration information. That's it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, thanks. Fine. So since no questions, now we'll move on to next topic called as FSM. Let's talk about FSM more detail level. So FSM, functional setup manager. Okay, functional setup manager. With the FSM, what we can do? With FSM, we can do configuration. How do we get access to FSM? With the help of application implementation consultant role. If you have access to application implementation consultant role, you can have access to FSM. So what we have to do from FSM? From FSM, we can enable. Before that, let me talk about a few points. So we have different product families, right? We have financials, okay, we have projects, we have HRMS, we have CRM, customer relationship management, we have SCM. This is how we have it, different product families. This I'm referring EBS. In EBS, this is how we have. When you talk about fusion, yes, financials we are calling as financials only. Project suite, the projects we are calling as PPM. PPM stands for Project Portfolio Management. The HRMS, already we discussed, HRMS taken from the PeopleSoft, that we are calling as HCM. Yes, CRM, and SCM. Fine, this is how we have. These are different product families. These are very primary business processes related to specific area. Okay, the total finance related transactions and all can be handled with a set of finance applications in the same way projects and all. So this is how we have a naming conventions in the fusion. Projects we are calling as PPM, Project Portfolio Management, which consists of costing, billing, the management, resource management, etc., which falls under the project suite. In EBS, the same. And it's HRMS, the set of modules, HR, payroll, compensation, the benefits, etc. All the modules falls under this HCM. The CM we know, and CRM, the set of different applications. So these product families, as per fusion, we call as offerings. Financials we call as offering, one offering. PPM we call as offering. SCM we call as offering. HCM we call as offering. These all are offerings. That's the terminology we use in FSM. Okay, different offerings. So each product family we are calling as offering. When you take example of offering called as financials, the financials is set of applications, right? Those are like GL and AP, ER, CM, FA. These are primary applications. There are some other applications also which will connect and work as a part of finance product family, but those are not required to discuss here. Just let's take this example. So financials we are calling as offering. Within the financials, these are different applications. What is the name for these applications? Applications we call as options. GL is an option. Okay, AP is an option. AR is an option. FA is an option. Okay. So product families we are calling as offerings. Within the product family, what are the applications we have? Those we are calling as options. So finance is one offering. Within that finance offering, these are the 5 options we have. When we do the implementation as a consultant, when we start with the fresh implementation, the fresh instance, what we have to do? The first task is we have to enable the offerings and options based on the scope of the implementation. For which offerings and options client is taking the subscription, those we have to enable within the fresh instance. So what we have to do? We have to enable offerings and options. Done. Say client taking the subscription for financials, and within the financials the options called GL, AP, AR only, for example. In that case, we have to go to financials offering. We have to enable the financial offering. Within the financial offering, say we have 5 options. Out of that, client is subscribed for only 3 options. Those are GL, AP, AR. Yes, we have to go and enable those. That's it. That is the first task. So if you enable, system will allow us to create the project. Okay, let me talk about few points, then I'll take your questions. Okay, and we can focus on those. And there are certain, again, even I'll be talking about more on that, but as a what activities we do, we are talking on that point. First, we have to enable the offerings and options. Then once offerings and options are enabled, based on the scope of the implementation, we can create implementation project. What does it mean by implementation project? Within the system, what we do as a part of implementation project creation, we select the offerings and options which we are going to implement for the client. By selecting offerings and options, we create implementation project. By selecting offerings and options, we create implementation project. Okay, once you create implementation project by selecting offerings and options, okay, system creates task list. System creates task list. Task list is nothing but list of setups. Which setups? Which offerings we are choosing into project, those offering, within that offering you can find the options. To implement those options, system will create the setup list. That only we are calling as a task list. So say we are creating implementation project, we selected offering called as financials and we selected options within that GL-APR. Once you create the project by selecting financials under these options called as GL-APR, to implement GL-APR modules, what setups we have to perform, that system creates here. Setups it will create means to facilitate that setup, the functions we have in EBS, the same we are calling here as a task. Okay, say for example in payables, payment term creation, we use function called as payment terms. The same in the Fusion you can call as find as a one task. Payment term is one task. Okay, supplier creation is one task. Distribution set is one task. Okay, everything what we create in EBS as a function, that here you can call as a task. The collection of tasks we are calling as a task list. Automatically system would create the task list. Here let's try to understand what is the purpose of the implementation project. What is the purpose of the implementation project? Here when you talk about say some project lifecycle management, what we do, the first phase is inception. Okay, start, then we'll plan. Okay, we'll execute, then we'll control and monitor. We'll control and monitor the project, then we'll close the project, means end. We'll end with the project. So in the project lifecycle management, these are the 5 phases we have. Sorry, so let's call as close. As per project lifecycle management, these are the 5 phases. When you talk about implementation, as a consultant, when we are involving in the implementation, we will come into the picture only in the execution. Okay, in the execution. The execution part only will come into the picture. What we do as a part of execution, we'll take the requirement. We'll do the, I'm writing very high level. I'm not writing each and everything detail level, not required for us. Okay, we'll do the solution design and we'll do the configuration. We'll do in the test instance and we'll do the testing. Okay, we'll do the testing and we'll conduct CRPs, UATs, and of course we'll do the solution design, we'll freeze it, we'll conduct the prototype sessions as CRPs and UATs, and we'll start working on the production and migration activities, right? Training to the user and various levels with discussions, etc., etc. Okay, then finally it will go live. There are many other activities in between, but we no need to talk on that here. To take one point, I'm just talking about this. So this is project lifecycle management. This is actual project execution management. This is what we do as a part of project execution, taking requirements, solution design. There are many other activities which will involve document creation, etc. and all. But out of all these, there is one activity called as configuration. This configuration you may do in test instance or production instance. That depends. Based on what phase we are in, accordingly we'll do it. Initially we'll do in the test instance and we'll be testing. Once everything is approved by client, we'll start working on the production. So it could be test or production, we do the configuration. Just to manage the configuration, we have to create the implementation project. That is only the point. Don't compare this implementation project with your project accounting or something else. Don't compare this project implementation project with a project lifecycle management or project execution management. Okay, it's not part of execution, it's not part of lifecycle management. It is just for the purpose of tracking the setups. That's it. To perform the setups and to track the setups. Only for configuration purpose we are creating implementation project in the Fusion applications. There is no other purpose. Okay, by creating the implementation project, what is the advantage? Instead of going and searching for different setups here and there, everything would be available in one place. And the other benefit is, if you have implementation project, it is easy for us to move the setups from one instance to another instance. Okay, so that we call as configuration packages. Okay, we can create configuration packages. We can create configuration packages. Configuration package means, with the help of project, whatever the setups you do, those all you can extract into a file. That file you can import into other instance. That is nothing but moving the setups from one instance to another instance. If you don't have any implementation project, being a functional consultant, you cannot create the configuration packages. Okay, you may ask DBAs to move the complete setups, to clone this setups to one instance to other instance. That again falls under DBA task. So if you have implementation project, it would be easy for us to manage the setups, to create the setups further, to manage the setups. Another big advantage is you can copy the setups from one project. You can create, by copying the setups from a specific project, you can create the configuration package that can be taken into other instance, so that system would create the same setups in that instance. Okay, so that's how it works. Fine. So first we have to enable the offerings and options. Hope you are clear on what is the option and what is the offering. So this is what we are calling as offerings and options. So based on the scope of implementation we have to enable, then we have to create implementation project by selecting the same. So that system would create the task list for all those modules. Then you can start doing the setups. Okay, once system creates task list, you can start doing the setups. We can start with the setups. Before we start with the setups, within the implementation project we have option where you can associate the task to specific team members. You may assign entire financials to one team member, or else GL to one team member, AP to another team member. That's how you can do task assignments. That may be one task or list of tasks, or that may be one option specific task. That means module specific setup tasks, or it could be entire offering. So that is possible. We can assign specific task, means one task. Maybe create payment term is one task, or else task list of setups, or else very specific offering, or else say option. One option, that means one module, or entire offering. We can assign to team members. You can assign one to one or the same to multiple team members also. Then they'll start working on it. Then they'll start working on that. Based on the progress of their work, they can update the status. Okay, team members can update the status. The team members can update, say we assign payables configuration to one consultant. The consultant can start updating, yes, I started working on the payables, or else payables configuration not started, or payables configuration is completed. This is how the status can be updated against that task or task list, means list of setups, or else for entire option or for entire offering level, the team members can update the status so that the project progress can be tracked. Okay, so team members can update the status so that we can track progress of the project. Again, when you talk about project, progress of the project, what project here? It's all about only setups. That means we'll be able to track the what is the progress of the setups within the instance. Project means here list of setups which we have to perform, and what are the setups you perform, the reference also would be available. So that is the meaning of it. So this is how it works. Okay, within the function setup manager, we have to enable the offerings and options. If you don't enable the offerings and options, you cannot do any setups. So we have to enable offerings and options. If you don't enable offerings and options, you cannot select those offerings and options into implementation project. Okay. So then system would create the task list once you create implementation project. What are the offerings and options we are selecting, based on that system would create the task list, and the task can be assigned to the team members. Then the team members will start doing the setups. Based on the progress of their work, they can update the status that can be tracked against the project. Total how many setups need to be completed, say 500 setups. Again, the 500 setups from which module, which offering, that also you could see detail level. From which module, which are say which options and which offering, what is the progress, how many completed, how much are pending, how much not yet started. Okay, again you can set the due date also, which setups need to be completed by which date. This and all you can set. So you can do all the setups from this functional setup manager by using the project. Once implementation is done, when the client will start using that application, at the time also, if you want to do any changes, if you want to do some additional configuration, that also you can manage from implementation project only. Okay, if you have a like project implementation project, you can create the configuration packages. Again, here the point is, which is a mandatory, which is optional. Yes, enabling offerings and options are mandatory. Project creation is not mandatory. If you create project, you will be able to create the configuration packages to move the setups from one instance to another instance. Even if you don't create implementation project, by default there will be task list where we can access from the different window. The assignment is not possible. Yes, setups anyway we can do it. The team members cannot update the status, and you cannot track the progress of the project. Simple point is this: we have to enable, then we can start working on the project. Sorry, we can work on the instance. If you enable offerings and options, you can start working on the instance. These are not mandatory. Of course, setups are mandatory. Implementation project creation. Okay, tasks assignment. Without creating implementation project also, you can do the setups. Without assigning anything to team members, we can do the setups, but progress cannot be tracked. So these are the points we have to understand when I talk about FSM functional setup manager. From functional setup manager, you can do all these, and you can create the configuration packages, and you can run and see the reports also to know the progress of the setups. There are some reports also which will give you the complete information, how much percentage, what exactly completed in terms of reports. Without going to reports also, you will be able to see the progress of the project. So apart from that, even rapid implementation also can be performed from the FSM. Rapid implementation we call as RI. So rapid implementation means is very simple. Instead of doing the setups directly through manual process within the instance, we can provide the same data within the spreadsheet, which are the spreadsheets are provided by Oracle as a part of rapid implementation approach. For many setup related data, they are providing the rapid implementation sheets. Within the sheets, by following the format, you can enter the data. Those sheets you can submit to the instance. That's how the setups will be created in the system automatically with the help of rapid implementation spreadsheets. Okay, anyway, we have session on that. We'll try to understand. But this is what we have to understand before we start with the FSM. FSM, for the purpose of setups configuration, FSM stands for Functional Setup Manager. Here, as a mandatory, we have to enable the offerings and options, and we can create as a next step. We have to create the implementation project. Then system will create the task list. The task or list or option or offering can be assigned team members. Then we can start with the setups, and team members can update the status. That's how much percentage of the setups are completed from which offering, which option, for overall project can be tracked. And if you have implementation project, you can make a copy and you can move to next other instance also. And within the FSM only, we'll be able to perform the activity called as rapid implementation, where we can provide the setup data within the spreadsheet environment that can be loaded into the application so that system would perform the setups automatically. So this is how it works. Any questions on this, please?
Lakshman Gajalan here. So when you are talking about the create implementation project, right?
Yeah.
By selecting the offering and options. So when we create an implementation project, it will be specific to business unit and legal entity, or we can
Nothing. Just it is specific to offerings and options. The implementation
offerings and options.
Offerings and options. So say you have an option called as payables. Option means module, right? You have payables.
Yeah.
So the payable you can implement for n number of business units. The business units maybe belongs to different legal entities or different primary ledger.
Okay.
Okay, it could be anything. Just
Okay.
it will give us access to specific task to perform the setup. That's it.
Okay, gotcha.
And one more point.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. One more point. When you are doing the implementation, how many implementation projects we have to create in the system? That totally depends on a team decision. The best thing what you could do is, if you are doing the implementation for say 5 countries, for each country you can create the separate implementation project. That means you are planning to manage the setups country wise. That's it. There is a benefit also if you create country wise, that you will understand once we start doing the setups. Better I can explain at the time, that would be easy for you. But ideally you can create one implementation project for one country. If you create for multiple countries one implementation project, that also will work. But when you are doing the configuration, there will be some mess. What is that mess? What goes wrong, we'll discuss. That we have to see in the instance only, so that you can understand in the better way. Any questions here, please?
So, Lakshman, so where is the scope here? I mean, the scope or initial CRPs that we conduct to gather.
One second. Scope never will be decided after CRPs and all. Based on the scope only, the this is a very known point. The scope means here the modules which you are going to implement. That is the scope I am referring. The scope of modules which you are going to implement. That should be known before starting the implementation. Once project is awarded, within that everything you could see. Before that, the planning and the sales, pre-sales will have a communication. The client will award the project. So there will be detailed information. So we win the project to implement which modules and which process, etc. There itself you can have a scope. Now here, as a consultant, will be part of in the execution. By the time we'll have a complete project plan, which is prepared by project manager or someone else. So by following that, what are the tasks we are going to get assigned, accordingly we'll be working.
So which means, so during the execution, so let's say I am representing AP module here. So what I would be doing, I would be enabling that respective option.
One second. It's not like you are going to implement payables, you will enable. No. So anyone can create the project. Anyone can create the project who has access to FSM. Say we are going to implement finance, SCM, procurement, HCM, PPM. I am working for SCM. I may create the project by understanding what is the scope. When I am working for the project, definitely I should know what are the all modules we are going to implement. So I'll go to create one implementation project. That's enough. You don't need to create. You may work for one module or one offering or multiple offering. Doesn't matter. You don't need to create project again. That is enough. That's it. That's how we do. So based on our assignment, we are not going to do enabling and selecting, etc. Anyone can create. That's it. Fine. Any other questions, please?
Right.
I have one question.
Yeah, Ramesh, please. See, don't mind. Just see. You no need to introduce your name. You no need to use my name to just say hi, Lakshman, or anything else. Directly, you can ask the question, please.
Say, come to EPS. Okay, here we are having application implementation methodology or unified methodology. Okay, similar to that. Okay, in Fusion, what kind of methodology do we use for implementation projects?
See, in EBS also, there is no very strict rule which methodology we have to use. Oracle recommends in past AIM, later OEM, right? There are many companies who are doing the implementation with their own methodologies. The same rule is applicable here. Since the latest is Oracle Unified Methodology, that's what we are using in the Fusion. Or there are many projects which I have seen, like they're not using any OEM or something else. They are using their own methodology in a few projects. Just it's all about certain documents preparation, capturing the setups, requirements, capturing the setups, and capturing some other test scripts into some different documents also. That's up to PMO, the project management office, what decision they'll take as their consulting practice for this cloud implementation or any other implementation. Accordingly, that would be decided. So ideally, we use OEM. That's it.
So on the similar line, what kind of artifacts that could be delivered being a functional consultant in Fusion applications case?
What we do in EBS same.
BR100, MD50, MD similar line?
If you say MD50, it's AIM, right? The same way, like if you refer Oracle Unified Methodology, that relevant documents. That's it.
Okay, so BR100 is equivalent to the similar line, right? The same BR100 document and then
document. Whatever the methodology you are using, respectively, you will be using the similar document. That's all. Yeah. Fine. So, see, the point is how we do in EBS, same approach we follow. Only that screens appears as some little bit new. Reason those are all web pages. There are certain enhancements we have. There are few new features we have. Apart from that, everything how we manage, how we execute, what responsibility who takes in EBS, the same applicable in the Fusion. In those areas, nothing new. Okay, roles are not changed. How people will work because this application is changed. No. Fine. Any other questions here, please?
During the setups, I mean, if there is a gaps, right? So how is it something that we need to think at this point of time, like how we address the gaps? Like this is a vanilla setups that we have, right? Let's say if I'm implementing AP, so if the business.
One second. What we do in EBS also we do setups. Here also we are doing the setups. Gaps where you identify, you take the requirement and you do the analysis. Okay, since you are experienced consultant, definitely you should know for which requirement, which existing feature standard functionality can help them. Means the mapping you do, the mapping you can you can find it's a mapped successfully, and is there any gap, right? You will be identifying the how to fill that gap. Maybe some workaround with some customization, or else there is no scope to fill the gap. That's what you have to realize. That's how you will design the solution, and accordingly to implement those setups, you will do the setups. Any additional requirement which cannot be catered by standard application, you may just give it to that development team by writing the functional spec. They'll start doing. This story remains same, nothing new in this. See, that's what if you are not aware of EBS, or if you don't know how the implementation is executed, you will be keep asking the questions. Okay, fine, done. Any other questions, please?
Lakshman, this configuration packages, what is the mode of them? Are they spreadsheets, or what sort of things are they?
So configuration packages, if you want to see in which form, you could see those are something like folder options. You'll be selecting that specific folder options. So that's how, based on that, system will trigger the process of task generation. Those you can extract into spreadsheets also. You can download. We'll see in the next session. We will be working on it. Yeah. Fine. Any other questions?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Lakshman, does industry-wise people use rapid implementation very common?
Without?
The rapid implementation?
Without rapid implementation?
Yeah, is it very common? People use it, or they go with the standard procedure?
Yeah, ideally we use rapid implementation for the basic, the common setups like ledger creation, BUs creation. So minimum primary ledger will create with a rapid implementation. In our classes, I'll take you through the two options, manual process as well as the rapid implementation approach for the chart of accounts and primary ledgers, LEs and BUs creation. The rest we can create through manual process, or else for other setups also we have a rapid implementation sheets. The projects, ideally, once you are comfortable with this product only, you will be working on that instances. You will be using the rapid implementation to create your ledgers and all.
Okay.
Yeah. Fine. Any other questions?
Hi, Lakshman.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I mean, apart from the course, like what you have taught today, I just want to have like one question. I'm totally from an developing background. I mean, I worked as a Fusion application developer in Oracle India, and I have also experience in EBS in fixing bugs and all. I mean, totally a technical background.
Okay.
So would this course be like more appropriate if I want to end up as a functional consultant, or because I see there's no technical aspect here, everything is functional only. So would I be able to, get a job as a Fusion functional consultant, because I don't have any implementation experience in EBS or in function or in Fusion.
Okay. Just 1 second. Let me stop this recording. I'll answer to your question.